everyone, I'm Marley of the blog Namely Marley. Thanks for joining me today for the 45th episode of the Chopped Podcast. You know, this is the podcast designed for people just like you, bloggers who love food. Each week, my goal is to share thoughts, stories, interviews, everything related to food blogging so that we can all learn together about what works with food blogging and maybe even a little bit about what doesn't. So I've spent the last couple of weeks kind of reflecting on the year. I guess that's kind of what we do this time of year, right? So there's been just so much going on. I mean, we started the Chopped Podcast back in February, and as a result, I've got to interview a lot of exciting people. I'm just thrilled for that opportunity and also thrilled for the response that I've received as a result. It's just been amazing to see how many people are finding the podcast of value. I also got the opportunity to meet and network with a bunch of bloggers and food bloggers from around the country at other events that I've gone to. For example, well, of course, there's the Chopped Conference, but also just other events that I went to this year. It's really great. I like to keep my, ear to the wall and to kind of listen to what's going on and the kind of trends that I'm hearing and different techniques people are using to help themselves grow as a blogger. I have also personally grown and stretched as I hired a life coach and invested in learning and other tools that have helped me to grow both personally and professionally. I've also read some great books and some pretty cool podcasts throughout the year as well. And all of this has led me to what I consider some realizations that I want to share with you today. These are what I'm calling my 8 strategies to grow your blog in 2016. So strategy number 1 is do what you love. I'm reading the book, Do What You Love, The Money Will Follow by Marcia Sinitar. And to be completely honest, I'm actually rereading the book since I've already read it before. And now I'm rereading it again and feeling kind of depressed about the fact that I obviously read this some time ago and I actually underlined certain passages and wrote notes on the side. And I think, how did I forget all that? Because, it seems like I'm reading it for the first time, but clearly I'm not, because I have my notes to prove that I have read this before. But that's okay. If it takes rereading it, it's worth it. She obviously spends some time focusing on, that, do you remember in college that Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Well, it's coming back here because, the very top of his pyramid is self-actualization. And Marcia spends some time talking about that. I mean, because that's what we're all after, right? Because if we're going to be doing this food blogging thing, then we need to be self-actualized, right? We need to really love what we're doing, because otherwise, why not just stick with the 9-to-5 job, right? At least that's the way I look at it. I mean, it's easy to feel like we're stuck in this spot where we have to do these things around blogging that maybe we don't really love. And then we actually end up not enjoying it as much as we could. So if our goal is to become self-actualized, then it's really important that we create a vision. And in this vision, we imagine that our high self-esteem and creativity creates skills and competencies that meet exactly what we need to get the work done. In this vision, we are tenaciously creative and tenaciously optimistic. And our work becomes a way of being, like a self-expression of love. I just love this scenario. It gives me chills, and this vision of the way the work can be. And Marcia actually continues by saying, when we are excited about what we're doing, when we are progressively moving toward the realization of meaningful goals, the difficulties become solvable problems, not insurmountable obstacles. Very cool. Okay, let's go on to strategy number 2, resist resistance. Here's another thing I love about this book by Marcia Sinitar, and that is, I think everybody credits Steven Pressfield for coming up with the notion of capital R resistance. But actually, Marcia's book predates his by a long shot, and she came up with that term. She's got a whole chapter on what she calls capital R resistance. It's not an uncommon pattern, right? The woman comes up with it, and the man gets all the credit for it later. Sorry, men. Not trying to put you down. But anyway, Marcia talks about resistance in her book. And when I read this chapter, I was floored because I do this stuff. I wonder if you do too. You'll have to read it and tell me. But first, she describes people who are not participating in resistance. And she says that they don't have a tendency to back away from problems, growth, or difficult tasks. They kind of take that stuff on. They protect their time for projects that stimulate them. And they create habits that allow themselves to use their talents rather than blocking them. Very interesting stuff, right? And then she goes into the symptoms of people who are under the spell of resistance. They prefer comfort over challenge. They crave safety over growth. They choose invisibility over visibility. They avoid confrontation. It can be kind of depressing when you see yourself in some of these lists like this, but I think the news is good because Marcia talks about some steps to overcome resistance, and that is mostly to take actionable steps towards your goal and to realize, if you pay attention to step number 1, which is, find your passion, that will help you overcome resistance. And it kind of reminds me of a story from when I was in graduate school. And if you've already heard this, then just fast forward past this part. But we had like this team building session early on in the program, and they actually took us out to this camp where there was a series of, different things that we would go through to get to know each other better. And one of them was this huge teepee made out of these big logs. It was probably at least 2 or 3 stories high and had different platforms along the way up and all these little kind of rock wall tower kinds of notches along the side of it. And basically we put a rappel belt on and we had to climb up that. And they gave us some rules and told us how to do it and a little bit of training on how to, jump off the rappel belt and everything. Anyway, we were completely safe because we had a rappel belt on. However, and me, I was just misconfident at the bottom, like, oh yeah, I'm totally going to do this. I'm going to make it up to that top platform, no problem. And then it was my turn to climb up there, and I watched other people do it, and was really excited about doing it myself. And then I got about, the point where the TP crosses, and now all of a sudden I'm feeling a little bit like I'm going upside down, and I was terrified. And I was so terrified, my heart was just pounding. I could hardly even breathe. I could feel my heart just like throbbing against my skin, and it was terrible. And I really just wanted to get down so bad. And so I did the very thing they told us not to do, which was I hugged the log. They said not to do that, but I didn't know what to do. And the coach down at the bottom he told me, put your right foot on the notch right beside your right leg. And when I looked at where he told me to put that, it seemed like it was too high up. I couldn't reach it. And I told him that. I said, I can't reach that. And his response was, you can reach farther than you think you can. And you know what? I did it. I put all my effort into it. I was scared to death. I grabbed that notch with my foot, and I could do it. And then I kind of pushed myself up to the next notch and the next notch, and the next thing you know, I was on the top of that platform. And I want you to know, it was the most exhilarating feeling of success, and it was just amazing. I think to be that scared and that petrified, and to listen to the coach say that I could reach further than I think I could, and to do that, it was very exhilarating. And I kind of feel like that's the way to accomplish and overcome resistance, and that is, obviously, he said to take it felt like a large step, but it was just one step. It was large, but it was one step. And that one step led me to take another step and another step. And the next thing you know, I made it to the top. So I just think that's kind of a good analogy of how to overcome resistance. So let's go on to strategy number 3, which is grow your network. Food blogging is basically being an entrepreneur. And that is basically being the boss of your own work. This is not easy stuff. It's gut-wrenching, in fact. Do not try to go this alone. You must build your network. Go to conferences, meet people, have business cards printed and hand them out. Network, network, network. The more events you can go to, the more you can reach out through emails afterwards, and that's all good stuff. The more connections you make, the more opportunities that can come from that. If you can't afford to travel, find local conferences. And even if they're not within the food blogging niche, that's okay. Just get out there and meet people who are also entrepreneurs and who are also, working to do this on their own. I used to think to myself, I would go to those food blogging conferences when I could afford to do it. But think about that for a little bit. That's kind of like saying, I will spend money when I make money. The rule number one of business is you've got to spend money to make money. So invest in yourself and go to a conference. If you're kind of nervous about what you're going to get, you want to make sure you get the most out of the money that you spend. Of course, that's called ROI in the business world, or return on investment. And you want to get a good return on your investment. So if that's a concern of yours, listen to Tessa and I as we talk in special episode number 1 about how to get the most out of a food blogging conference, because there are some things that you can do to be ready and make sure that you get the most out of it. Okay, strategy number 4. Jumping from idea to idea is not a bad thing. It's easy to let our success in one area hold us back. We become kind of like trapped by that area. It's like we've created a circle and we have to play within that circle. I loved the interview I had with Erin Clark in episode 32, where she talked about how even though she reached a certain level of success with her blog, she rebranded it. She changed the name and everything. She needed to redefine what success was for herself, and it wasn't what she started out with in the food blogging world. And so she stayed within the food blogging world, but she changed the name of her blog and changed the URL and made it was a pretty big step, a pretty brave step, and she was very thrilled with the outcome. So I think that's understandable, don't you think? In order to find out what you love, you may need to play around until you do find what you're passionate about. And I think making sure that you're not afraid to take those steps is important. It may mean, I don't know, maybe you start a second site, or you could redefine the one that you're on right now. Just don't let fear rule the day and keep you from playing. Think about it. This is your blog. It's your sandbox. And as my life coach, Jay, says, don't be shooting all over yourself. In other words, that I should do this, I should do that. Don't do that. This is your area. You get to create it the way you want it to be. Okay, strategy number 5, define your success. I know that I've said this before, but you have to hear it again. You have to define success for yourself. And this actually links back to number 1, because one thing I've learned from the interviews done this year, everyone defines success differently. For example, Liz Delacroix back in episode number 5 talked about how she doesn't rely on ads as her main source of revenue. Tessa Arias back in episode 1 kind of said the same thing when she said you don't have to rely on ads as your main source of revenue. Some folks find that food photography is their biggest goal and their biggest passion, and that's what they're striving for with their food blog. They focus on that. Pardon the pun. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Others hate the food photography and just do what they have to do, and that's fine too. Some food bloggers generate income in other ways, like Sarah Cornelius back in episode 20, who creates revenue through illustrations that she makes and sells on her site. Define your success the way you want it to be on your blog, and then go for it. Okay, strategy number 6, create a social media strategy. I talked with Kathy Patowski back in episode 17 about her social media strategies. She should know she's got so many followers, it's crazy. And then I interviewed Kara Antis in episode 22 on how she uses Instagram to find her voice. And then I heard Amanda Redke speak at the Chopped conference. Between the 3 of these, I was just blown away by the things that social media can do for us. Here's what I learned. You have to learn to relax and play and experiment with social media. It's so easy just to be timid and maybe a little bit fearful about what we're going to do on social media, play within the rules and all these things. I think that it's easy to think that we want to manage or control our social media. We have to figure it out and understand those rules and play within them. When is the best time to post? What is the algorithm? How can we work it? The one thing I have realized is that even if we figure things out today, it's just going to change tomorrow anyway. So why not just have fun with it in the meantime? And if you're hating something about, one social media site like Pinterest now, don't worry, they will change it. So for example, they made some recent changes to Pinterest and I am back to loving it again. I'm really happy about that. Not that I haven't bellyached a little bit in between. Yes, I have, but I am learning too, so be patient with me. But Kara talked about how she used social media as an opportunity to cultivate authenticity. I mean, if you think about it, Instagram is a great example because you can experiment and put some posts up and see what works and what doesn't work. And you can delete those posts if you want to as well. It's not that big of a deal. As a result, Kara found a passion that she had and for kind of like a more simplified photography. She started having more fun with it, and that actually changed the way she approached her blogging as well. So I just think that's such a great success story right there. Amanda described at the Chopped conference how we can let our fear of negative responses from our readers hold us back. She described a scenario where she posted a photo of a recipe. I think it was a cake recipe she mentioned. She put that on Facebook and she received a negative comment. And let's say that negative comment was something like, "This is gross." So you know what she did? Instead of cowering in a corner, and let me just say in my best, Dirty Dancing voice, no one puts Amanda in a corner. Amanda cropped that photo really tight so that it almost, was so far into the cake, it didn't really look like a cake. And she said something like, "Some people think this recipe is gross," or something to that effect. And you know what? It's in a lot of traffic her way because people were intrigued, like, what is that? And what's gross about it? And so I just think that's ingenious to kind of turn something that felt like a negative into a positive. I read this awesome quote. It says, "Please do not feed the fears," because fear looks a little bit like bear, except with an F. I know English is just so weird, don't you think? Anyway, don't feed the fears. Experiment. Let social media be more of your playground. If someone doesn't like something you post, just say whatever or use it to your advantage. Be fearless. Okay, strategy number 7, no SEO. Okay, so, I'm using the term "no" with air quotes here in a relative manner. I think you should know SEO to the extent that you can. I really feel confident that if there was an MBA in blogging, SEO would be one of those foundational courses. And it would probably be one of those courses that we all hate. We'd all groan about it, kind of like accounting, but we'd have to take it, I talked with both Amy Lynn Andrews in episode 16 and Amber Bracegirdle from episode 34 about the topic of SEO. So if you're confused about SEO, I encourage you to go back and have a listen to these 2 episodes, particularly Amber's interview on SEO hacks, because it's just like these, it's like a food blogger's guide to SEO, and it's really great, very practical tips. But the best tip I've heard on SEO so far is to create content that your audience wants. If you try to write for everyone in the world, no one is going to be interested. So pick a niche and then become the go-to resource for that niche. And then don't be afraid to zero in on a topic. Own that topic and then gradually expand out. I know there are some definite SEO best practices too. I highly recommend using the Yoast SEO plugin. I resisted it for a long time, but once I made the switch, I was really happy with it. Now with every post, I make sure I check that SEO plugin and I make sure that I've got the green light to go. And then I know that I've got the SEO basics covered. I'll leave the link in the show notes page in case you're interested in checking it out too. Look, I know that you can hire someone to do the SEO for you, and that's a great option. But you risk getting boondoggled unless you know it too. You at least need to know enough to be able to speak the language and understand the terms. That way, you can trust your bull meter if your SEO expert says something that sounds kind of wonky. So I'm not saying that you have to do it. I'm just saying you need to know. Because here's the thing. This is kind of a rule that we talk about in one of my corporate jobs, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. So don't hand over your power to some expert. Know SEO, know enough to be able to speak the language and understand what's right and what's wrong. Okay, strategy number 8 is do what you love. Did I just come full circle? I think I did. But if you're worried I'm losing it, well, I probably am. But that's just beside the point. What I'm trying to say here is that do what you love and nothing else. Think about the things that just make you feel excited, that you can't wait to get up in the morning. Is it the food photography? And then do that with gusto. Is it the recipe development, the writing? That's all great stuff. But what happens if you kind of detest the bottom and the right-hand side of the post? That's what Christine Pittman referred to in episode 31 as the parts of a post that's not the content. It's the tags and the meta description and the SEO plugin stuff. Christine didn't like that part, and so she hired a virtual assistant to do it for her. And actually, I think now she has 2 virtual assistants that, works for her on her social media and all those kinds of things. So what do you do if you can't afford a virtual assistant? Well, this could be a good time to think creatively. For example, is there someone you know that you could trade services with? Like maybe you make a cake or a weekly meal for them, and in exchange, they do a set number of virtual assistant hours for you. Or think about the things that you would be doing if you had a virtual assistant doing the things that you didn't like. Like, for example, would you be writing an e-cookbook? That could then turn into additional revenue for you so that you can see where the trade-off could be worth it. Would you be able to do another post per week, which could then maybe drive more traffic to your site, which could help offset the cost of the virtual assistant? I've also talked with other bloggers who have chosen to continue with their full-time job to fund things like virtual assistants for their blog. So sometimes you can just think creatively about how this can work for you. Also in the book, Do What You Love, the whole point is that you need to do the things that make you come alive. She says, our energy should flow unobstructed through us in the service of the work that we're about to do. All of us can take steps, no matter how small and insignificant at the start, in the direction we want to go. So she describes how sometimes those first steps may not actually be activity towards working on your blog. It could actually be, doing things like cleaning up your office and getting your office space organized. It could also be reading the manual on your DSLR, watching a webinar on food styling. All those kinds of things really make a difference. Maybe you can't afford to hire a virtual assistant to do your social media, but you can afford a tool like CoSchedule to help you schedule your social shares more efficiently. Listen to episode 23 with Nicole Johnson as she talks about the best way for food bloggers to use CoSchedule. I use it. It's a great tool. It really does make a difference, and it can help you schedule things, like your posts out into the future, and it can be a huge time saver. So identify the things that light you from within and move in those directions, and then find ways you can offset the things that, really don't work for you. I know we were all looking for a magic pill. I know I have been. I would love to have a magic pill for dieting or cleaning or the laundry or, dishes. But blogging mimics life, I guess, and there really is no magic pill. But according to Marcia Senatar, that doesn't mean it has to be a drudgery either. If you're finding yourself dreading too much of the work that you're doing, then re-listen to this episode and then start with strategy number 1 and find the passion and the love for what brings you alive, and do as much of that in your day as you can. Some of that may not even be related to blogging. It may be that, you're feeling down about the blogging because you're not getting enough workouts in, or you're not spending enough time with your friends. Make sure you have something set up regularly. That's really important. Julia Cameron, in her book, The Artist Way, talks about actually going out on an artist date. Have you ever done that? It's like where you go out by yourself and do something fun. For example, maybe you go to an antique store, or maybe there's some shabby chic shop down the street that you've really been wanting to go through. Doesn't mean you have to buy anything. It just means you're taking yourself on a date by yourself, and you're just going to meander through the store at your own pace and not at somebody else's pace, and not worried about if somebody else is thinking that you're taking too long or whatever. Maybe you want to go to a museum. There's lots of great museums, and many of them, offer even free admission or just a minimal admission, and just feeling artsy and walking through that museum, that could really spark some creative inspiration that way. So do these things that make you feel alive, and you'll be surprised the way these things kind of make a huge difference for you and your blog. Okay, that's it for today's episode. This is the final episode for 2015. This is the conclusion of season 1 of the Chopped podcast. Wow, it has been an amazing experience. We began way back in February, committed to a weekly podcast, and we have had thousands of downloads and subscriptions. And I'm so in awe and so blown away by it. It's really exciting. And we're going to take a couple of weeks off before we begin season 2. And I am excited to tell you that we have some great things lined up. And so, can't wait to share those things with you soon. I'm so grateful for you and the opportunity to share with you. So now it's your turn. Send me an email or leave me a comment on the site, or send me a line via social media. Let me know what's working for you and what your biggest challenges for 2016. I would love to hear from you. So everybody, happy holidays to you all and Happy New Year.